Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Shed Organics Show. My name is Jordan, and today we are joined by the incredible Keith Edwards. Now, Keith is a landscape consultant in Melbourne and is a bit of a legend in the game here in this country. He's developed a reputation for building some really thoughtful and creative spaces for people that not only have longevity and practicality in terms of being able to utilize the space now and into the future, but also having a little bit of a really people focused attitude towards it, really enjoying the process of working with a client to build this space long term. Having it, as he points out in there, somewhere that invites you out to be able to come out into the garden and explore what is around each corner. And I really like that sentiment. I really like the way that he phrases that. He also shares a very similar, I guess, point of view in terms of how important our soil health is, and shares some really practical and important tips on setting your soil up for success in a landscaping project and how he approaches all of the different soil types, conditions, sunlight, water, all of these things to make sure that that soil is thriving from the get-go. Now, I'm super grateful to Keith for coming on and sharing some of his expertise. I've been keen to pick his brain for a while. So, without further ado, I'm sure you're going to enjoy this conversation. This is Keith Edwards from KE Landscapes in Melbourne. If you had to, if you had to put into your words what the role of a landscaping consultant is in
hmm
terms of consulting for clients and trying to get the best outcome, balancing what you know in your knowledge versus what the client wants. Can you talk me through the role of a landscape consultant in your eyes?
Yeah, well, I've been doing this for a very, very long time, as you well know, Jordan. And I guess the biggest thing that I ask from all my clients is to provide me with a concise brief.
Hmm.
And that concise brief can take in lots of different forms. A lot of people love to just put in Pinterest and therefore take pictures and shots that they find inspiring for their own particular gardens. But I also like to, once I've read that, is to sit down with them and actually go through them and just confirm what aspect of that particular picture did they particularly like.
Hmm.
Because it might be just something very, very small in that overall picture that takes their fancy. It might be a little water feature somewhere rather than the whole overblown thing. Um,
Hmm.
and then I will explain why I'm taking the brief and what I'm trying to achieve, and that is to provide the best possible outcome design wise for them.
Hmm.
And other things that you ask them to provide is things that they see that garden requiring in the future. So, if a budget doesn't allow to put a pool or a tennis court or something else at that particular stage, those are the sorts of things that I need in order to work the whole thing out as a complete concept. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Yes, definitely, because you're thinking long term, and if you've got something that is going to be put in the
Mm-hmm.
future, then you don't want to be building something that's, difficult to move or you have to move at all, really.
Yep.
So when you're talking about these plans with them, how much of it is like structural related in your work, in your particular line of work? Things like patios, extensions, garden sheds, these types of
Decking,
things.
playgrounds.
Exactly. Yes, yes, yes.
Yep.
How much of it is that? And then the plant side of it as well, the gardens and those types of things. What sort of balance are you doing?
Right. Well, the first thing that you would design or you would put as consideration of your design are those hard structures.
Hmm.
Whether they want paved areas, whether they want a fire pit, whether they want seating, whether they want a playground for the children. And that's probably that is a really critical question to ask clients, because there's no point in putting a playground way down the back corner of the property
Mm.
that's going to be hidden with vegetation, because if you can't see a child fall off a bloody swing or something, you're in trouble.
Absolutely.
So, so I design playgrounds, for instance, around the area that is most visible from the house, and that generally, believe it or not, and I don't want to put this in any dismissive way, it's generally the kitchen.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
that's where mum might be cooking or washing or doing something. So that is a great place in order to put the kids playground area. So it can be easily seen. And so it's all those sorts of things that you need to sort of put down first. Planting comes later.
Hmm.
And that is also has to be a reflection upon what they require from their garden.
Hmm.
Whether they want vegetable beds, whether they want fruit trees, whether they want a perennial garden or an edible garden, whatever else. These are the
Yeah.
sorts of things that become the key constructs of their design. It's not my design. It's not me influencing them. It is me asking the questions in order for them to get the best possible outcome for their garden.
Yeah. That's very true. How much, though, do you find yourself having to reel in some of the ideas in terms of just bringing some sort of level of realism to it? What are your experiences with that?
Well, a lot of those things get back to budgetary things.
Right. Okay.
And to give you an idea, I've just finished a design where it's a granny flat, so the mother is moving in on the block. It's a blank canvas. They wanted a decking out the front. They wanted various aspects, but it all gets back to a budgetary thing. So the actual size of the decking that I've designed has to come down in size in order to fulfil their budget requirements.
Right.
So that's a very, very big consideration. Paving, for instance, is another very expensive, outlay that people
Yeah.
have. Um, Arbors, these sorts of things also play an awful big part in what plants are going to cost. And then if the clients are wanting to have a particular aspect of their garden showcased very, very quickly, then another consideration is the cost of plants.
Of
If
course.
they want to put advanced plants in or advanced trees in, that's a big budget requirement on their part as well. So all these things go into play, but I guess the way that I look at it is I will provide them with the best possible design, and then that is a they can backstage and backpedal that
Yeah.
and make it fit. By perhaps not doing all the planting in one particular hit, but maybe doing it in stages as they can afford it. But if the whole thing's laid out design wise, then you've got a point to start and a point to finish,
Hmm.
and that's a critical thing. And then if the clients are going to be doing that on that a planned basis, where to start and where to finish, I always say, well, listen, start at the back because you don't want to be traipsing over the stuff you've done in between hand and destroying all that. So
Very
start at the
clever.
back and work your way to the front, or have it a plan so that you've got a way that you can attack that.
Yeah, very clever. Wouldn't have even thought of that. Apart from then budget requirements, like obviously budget would be a big one because most people would come in with not much idea as to how
Mm-hmm.
much these things cost. But aside from budget, say budget was covered,
Mm-hmm.
then we've got people that might have wants and needs for things that just aren't going to work in that particular space, whether it's the selection of plants, whether you want a cactus garden in somewhere that's really soggy ground or, something along those lines. How much of that are you having to challenge? Because obviously it's their idea and you're trying to facilitate as much as possible. But if you know that putting a plant in and having it in that situation is going to cause it to die or it's just going to fail in that spot, how much of that are you offering to the client to help them in that regard?
If they're wanting a succulent garden in a bog hole, then I would simply tell them go and get themselves another designer because it ain't going to work
Yeah.
unless they put in those requirements that are going to satisfy those conditions. And that may be to build up that area. It may be to use a free draining sand to build it up. It may mean that you've got to put in cut-off drains to isolate that particular patch, and then it can work. So
Right.
there's those sorts of things that you've got to explain and explain in a manner that the clients understand. And cost outlay is one big one where
Hmm.
you say that, look, you're not going to achieve it if you don't do these particular things. You don't put these practices in place, they're not going to work.
Yeah, that's right. And I presume that, your knowledge base that comes into this is really helpful because then you can say to the client, look, I've seen this before, or whatever it is. And if you really want it, these are the steps that we're going to have to
Mm-hmm.
come in, and it's probably going to be a little bit more expensive or to divert things, or it's just you're working against the flow of the natural land and things like that. Um, I imagine as well, like having some sort of observation of the space, in different times of year or under different weather conditions, or getting an idea of the sun, the amount of exposure, the wind, the shade, all of this type of thing. What sort of time frame are you getting to observe the property, and how much of that are you taking from the client initially?
You're asking questions all the time when you go onto a site. You're asking the clients, and you're looking. I mean, like everyone's got a mobile phone that's got a compass app on it. So, and there's also another app that I use that shows me the shadows as the winter comes in and as the summer comes in. So
Beautiful.
I've got a lot of that information already based on there. Another thing that with some clients that I will ask is to get the site surveyed
Hmm.
so that I know where the contours are, I know which way the land is flowing, and then I can build and work on things on that particular basis. Um, a lot of my clients, I just ask that question. Look, can we please organise a survey plan? And once I've got that, everything is plotted accordingly. I've got all the levels sorted out. I know what the finished house level flooring is. I know where the decking's going to work out. I know where so all those things are all worked out.
Yeah.
But it's a case of knowing what you've got to work and work with.
Yeah, well, exactly right. And it's kind of taking a bit of a scope as to, yeah, what are my options here? What have we got here? What's the land trying to do and tell us and all of these types of
Yeah,
things. And then build in that. It's a lot of problem solving, I imagine,
it
Keith.
is.
Is there what are some of the maybe common problems that you're trying to solve regularly, like that you come up against, apart from, obviously we spoke about budget in the planning and things, but in terms of the actual implementation on the land, what are some of the problems that come up commonly?
If we use a current job that's just been completed, for instance, um, this is a development in a subdivision on a sloping block of land where there is no legal point of discharge for stormwater.
Oh,
And I know that sounds absolutely crazy, but this is the way that things were done, you know,
right.
50, 60 years ago. So in this particular job, the people on the high side, of my clients, are shedding water through open pipes off the housing, the roof. They're collecting as much as they can into tanks and so forth. But the water is traversing all the way down and running into the property at the back.
Right.
So the only way that we could manage that was to select a particular type of mulch that was going to allow the water to wash through, but slow that water movement down.
Yeah.
To have the best possible soils that are high in carbon, that will absorb a lot of moisture, and then let that water just traverse very very slowly down to the very back perimeter where we put a swale drain all the way across, and then
Uh-huh.
we put in a big pond at the very, very lowest point. So the water went down the block, hit the swale drain, and then slowly moved across to the pond area. We had an enormous amount of planting put in around that pond, so there was a lot of water absorption. And lots of roots and so forth that will help that reticulation of that water going through it. So you've got to think outside the square when you're dealing with things like that. You've got to make sure that you've put management into your designs that actually cater for all those
Yeah.
possible outcomes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And especially in a country where we do see crazy amounts of rain come
Yeah.
down sometimes. And that is often a problem with you mentioned like estates or building, fairly I guess, cost-effective housing on a large scale.
Hmm.
There's quite a few that have gone here around in Brisbane that have all of these sort of things. There was one whole area that was put in with, hundreds of houses, and they didn't put sewage in
Oh,
beforehand. So they were literally coming in and pumping, getting a company to come pump and take away the sewage the whole time.
yep,
These types of things, to me, like you said, seem a little bit crazy, but like a lot of these properties are not set up. The soil is not right. Like
no,
the way that it's built and the contour of the land is not thought about in these instances. And quite often they're clearing so much of the vegetation there to build these houses, so there's
yep,
nothing to soak up all of that water.
yep.
Um, is that something you're seeing commonly in certain houses versus ones that probably have a little bit more land or have a little bit more thought in terms of that?
No, not necessarily. I mean, you've got to remember what sort of soils we've got here in Australia.
Mm,
We have got the oldest soils in the world.
yeah,
We were part of Gondwana land. When we moved away, we've had no new volcanic activity or anything else. Our soils are incredibly depleted of goodness in them.
hmm,
So every single site that I go onto, I have a set of specifications which lay out exactly what has to happen to the soils in order to give the best performance for the plants that we're going to be putting in.
brilliant.
So, for instance, we trying to find good organic compost is a hell of a job.
Hmm.
You've got a few places up in Brisbane that I've actually mentioned to my followers up in there that a very very good compost. A Rocky Point, I think, is one.
Yes. Yep.
They have a fabulous range of composted soil, so I will recommend them. But down here in Victoria, um, what I'm finding the biggest problem is that we're having these green bins that everyone has in their properties, except me, that they load all their rubbish in, their green rubbish,
Hmm.
and that is then goes off to a company that is then utilising that to turn that into a compost. But when that product goes into, say, a garden supplies, it is not a compost and it is not a good soil because it has a pH sometimes of over 9.
Yes. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
now you can't grow anything successfully in a composted soil that is over 9. So down here, we have a fabulous relationship with a company called Clyde Compost, and I've worked with Vince now for probably 10, 15 years.
Beautiful.
And he produces a quality compost that is every single batch has a batch number that has been tested. And on the back of every single bag, there is the pH. And I
Beautiful.
picked up a bag yesterday to put into my vegetable garden, and pH on the back was 7.07.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it rates
Beautiful.
all the NPK and all the trace elements. They're all monitored. Now that costs him a lot of money to have
Yes.
AgPath um, look at those soils and then do all the tests on it. That costs him a lot of money.
Yeah.
But he's now into Bunnings
Oh,
down here in
good.
Melbourne, yeah,
Cool.
which is fabulous for him. But he's selling a quality product. Now we get back to these rotten, horrible old soils that we've got here in Australia. So with my designs that I do here in Melbourne, they are specified with Clyde compost
Hmm.
added to the soil at a placement depth of 75 mil.
Great.
All right. Now, that also has a 30% additive of a product called lignite humate.
Hmm.
All right. Now, lignite humate is just another word for dirty brown coal.
So it's like what a humic acid or humates.
No, no, no. It's brown coal. So
So it
brown
is the
coal.
original brown coal.
It's original brown coal. It is full of moisture. It only contains 20% carbon,
Yep.
but the other 80% is humate. Humate is the
Beautiful.
building blocks of life, the
It
building
is.
blocks that you see in rainforests.
Absolutely
All
is.
right, so that is mixed into his compost, and that is then applied at a depth of 75 mil and incorporated mechanically into the soil to a depth of 200 mil.
Wow.
All
Okay.
right, so that's what we're putting in. And then another part of the specifications will say that every single plant that is put into the ground, when the hole is dug, before the plant goes in, there is a teaspoon of Myco Gold, which is made by a company up in Queensland called BioStim.
Yep.
All right, that is put into the bottom of every one of these holes. The plant is put in, the soil is put around, and then it's watered in.
Beautiful.
All right,
Beautiful.
so that myco gold being a fungus,
Hmm.
fungal spores, 4 different types of fungi. So you've got endo and ectomycorrhizal fungi, you've got bacillus and trichoderma,
Trichoderma, yeah.
and then you've got all the different ranges of those particular fungal species.
Hmm.
Now, some of those are going to have a relationship with the root system of those plants
Hmm.
that's going to then take from the plants the two sugars that are created in photosynthesis, so sucrose and fructose, and grow a root system that will increase that plant's capacity by 600%. And then
Amazing.
on top of that, there is another product that we put in called Monash,
Hmm.
and this is a rock dust,
Yep.
and it is the only rock dust in Australia that contains 3 different types of rocks. So you've got up to 60 trace elements and minerals that are going back into the
Beautiful.
soil to feed the plants, to feed the soil, to feed the microbes, to feed life. And
That's so perfect.
every one of those jobs that I do, you go back in 6 months' time, mate, and the growth in those is incredible. So
I
this is
bet.
all part of the specifications that I put into my jobs.
Keith, you're speaking my language. That all of that sounds absolutely incredible. The focus on the soil was actually a question that I wanted to jump into at some stage during this, but you've nailed everything that I would wanted to add. There's a few things that you touched on that I just want to click on through that. The first thing was obviously the green bin, the composting, the way that you choose a certain compost. I use Red Soil Organics up in Gympie. They've got an
Mm-hmm.
absolutely incredible compost up here and just full of humus. Like it's just black and sticky and delicious.
Yep,
And you're right. So many people just throw stuff in the green bin. It's then basically sold back to us as a very sterilized and an extremely alkaline mix,
yep,
which is just terrible. And you're right. It discourages a lot of gardeners that are getting in that they think, oh yes, I go and get some compost. You go get a bag of compost and then nothing grows. You're kind of very disheartened. And it's not understanding that the soil life itself, the actual soil food web, the whole interplay of everything underneath the soil is what gives that soil itself its vitality, and then therefore the plants and everything as well. Water retention,
yep.
the list goes on. So that was the first one. Then you mentioned obviously that you do mycorrhizal fungi, trichoderma, bacillus, incredible inoculant to put straight into that root zone, straight on the roots. I do that every single time. Same with
Mm-hmm.
seeds. And then you also mentioned the rock dust, a
Yep,
huge, important missing point in a lot of soils.
yep.
So, so just to clarify, you're doing this, a standard procedure for you for every single garden that you're putting in, 200
Every,
mil worked in,
yep,
same
yep.
thing for everything?
Every single job. So when you think about a raw site that you're working on, there is not a lot of flora and fauna in that soil.
Hmm.
So you're not destroying anything by mixing these things in. In fact, you are just setting yourself up for enormous amounts of success.
Yep.
So that's why I put them in. So every one of my specifications on every one of my designs has got all those components worked in. Whether I'm dealing with a client here in Melbourne or I'm dealing with a client in Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
all these things are worked out and they're all part of the specifications that are on my designs.
Yeah, you're right because like I'm a big fan of what I would call no till or minimal till,
Yep.
but there is certainly a point where turning the soil to begin with, like you say, if there's actually nothing in there and it's a pretty devoid soil, just layering organic matter on top and trying to get things growing in it is going to really take a long time before all of that's penetrated right down
Yep.
to those depths. So turning it over at that instance is actually quite helpful.
It is.
Do you then try and just do a no-till approach sort of after that and just
Um,
layering compost, etc.?
well, I guess probably the best way to explain that is with my own garden.
Cool. Yeah.
All right. So I've got a 180 square meter backyard. Not huge,
No.
but in that backyard, I've got over 70 fruit trees.
Wow.
I've
Wow.
got I've got 320 linear meters of hedging, which is about 1.6 meters high. and then in between that, which is it's a circular hedge, and then in that circular hedge, in that circular area, is a lawn of
Hmm.
kikuyu,
Oh,
and
cool.
sitting on top of that lawn are 8 raised vegetable beds.
Oh, okay.
So three triangular beds and five rectangular beds, 1.2 by 2.4 by 450 high, which is the
Yeah.
height of a chair.
Yes. Yes.
Now, I have another section of the garden bed in the ground, which is just for growing additional food plants, not outside of the raised beds.
Yeah.
Now, I treat that area totally different to the way that I treat my raised beds.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that if you think about an organic farmer who is going to grow organic vegetables, they are striving to have in their soil 5% organic matter.
Hmm.
All right. My raised beds have been tested. My raised beds have 35% organic matter through them.
Wow.
So the way that those beds are treated is the mulch on the top is who flung dung from Nutrog,
Hmm.
and that's the final layer. So when I take a crop out, I would put a sheet of plastic over half of the top of the bed, and I
Hmm.
take the who flung dung and put it on top of the sheet, and then I dig out 100 mil of soil,
Okay.
composted soil, and I put that on the fruit trees. I
Okay.
then put back into that um, bags of Clyde compost, lignite humate, and then I put the mulch back over the top, and then I had another layer on top of that of the who flung dung.
Okay.
All right, and then I add Monash rock dust to the top of that, and then I inoculate the whole lot with Nutrog Go-Go juice. So
Nice.
therefore, I am feeding the microbes in the soil that then feed the worms, and in those beds, we don't have earthworms in those beds, those raised beds. We have compost
Compost
worms
worms.
in those beds.
Yeah.
So and those beds will sit. The current one I've just planted tomatoes in down here 2 days ago. Those beds sat for 4 weeks before anything was planted into it.
Yeah.
When I first put the rock dust down, I had the lass who owns Monash, Beck, come
Yeah.
down and have a look, and we pulled the soil back. There was no worm life. Now the statement used to be, if there's no worm life, there's no soil life. All right. So by doing what I've done, added the rock dust, populated it with go-go juice. 2 weeks later, you pull that back, and it is just teeming with little tiny composting worms. It is just
Beautiful.
a living basis. Now, resting that for 4 weeks before planting just sets yourself up for enormous amounts of success.
Hmm.
Now, the difference between the other bed, the ground bed, is that I initially put enormous amounts of compost into that, dug it all the way through, added the lignite humate. I put biochar in it because it was a very draining sort of an area. So I'm locking in lots and lots of carbon into that soil.
Yep.
So that when you walk on that soil now, when it's wet, that soil sticks to the bottom of your feet. So it is flocculated. It
Yes.
is so chock-a-block full of carbon that it's not going to wash away. It's not going to blow away. It is just chock-a-block full of goodness. Now, when I rotate a crop in it, I do not dig that soil.
Hmm.
I broad fork it and
Yeah.
add compost from the top and get it deep down. So I've got a broad fork that goes down 300 mil into that soil,
Yeah. Okay.
and the compost and everything else, the air, everything. And if you saw that soil today, it is chock a block full of worms, earthworms.
Beautiful.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's a growing medium. So the two beds are handled totally different.
That's very interesting, mate. Just going back.
Hey guys, really quickly, jumping in, I just want to remind you, if you are not subscribed to this show, that is the number one thing that you can do to show me your support. So if you're finding value from this conversation and you're deeply engaged, I would love you to hit the follow or subscribe button. All right, back to the show.
To your raised bed and pulling the soil out. Just can you clarify what the thinking is behind why you would pull it out? Is it because it's sort of been used in terms of nutrients and you're trying to just replenish it and
Yeah.
then fill it
What what
up?
what I'm trying to do there is to ensure that there is no pathogens in that soil that are
Okay.
going to have an effect on the next crop that's coming through. I would rather, if there's any parasites or any pathogens that are going to be negative to that soil, they can go out and in and around the fruit trees, and that's a fine thing. So what I'm putting back in actual fact is compost that is mixed in with the deeper soil. So I'm only
Hmm.
taking out 100 mil, but I'm using the deeper soil down there. Once again, using the broad fork to get in as deep as I can, and then mixing all that lot up together.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then, as you say, when you adding these amendments and things like that, you have to give it that time to sit because it can get a little bit hot. Planting straight into there can just, sizzle some roots and the all little delicate hyphae and everything that are in there
Yep.
from the fungus and stuff. So that's really, really interesting. So then when you're bringing that sort of thinking to a client, uh, for someone growing food crops, flowers, things like this, a general garden takes a bit of maintenance and takes a bit of time and effort.
Mhm.
So are you trying to adapt and sort of shift the methods based on the client, how much time they have, how integrated their gardens are, and their goals and time availability, things like that?
Yes, I am, and that all gets back to part of the brief. I mean, if you can imagine, when you're putting in a perennial garden, there is a fair amount of work at the end of that particular season, and you've got to
Yes.
know and understand that. So, and then I have other clients who want low maintenance, minimal amount of work that they've got to do. So, therefore, you select the plants that fit that format of what they require. So, there's
Yeah.
not a lot of maintenance involved. I've seen lots of designers that love to put in all these bald plants and everything else, different shapes, different coloured bald. It's all maintenance. It's all
Mm.
things you've got to go back and attend to. But I say to my clients right from the start, if you are not prepared to follow my instructions about setting your soil up for success, then please choose someone else.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
go in there and I explain the whole thing in the same manner that I've sort of
Yeah.
said to you today that this is what we need to do. If you're going to be investing in your garden, you've got to invest in your soil first because that's where it all comes from. That's the basis of success in a garden. And,
Yeah.
and it's there. And I mean, I've gone around gardens that I designed, 25, 30 years ago, and they still look as good today
That's
as
brilliant.
they did, not long after they were completed. Another big thing that I'm using in a lot of my designs now is I'm using what's called granitic sand, which is otherwise known as crusher dust.
Yep.
And this is a granite that's been where they've quarried it. They've got the very very fine stuff down the bottom. So when it's put out on a soil that has all these amendments in it, the client's got nothing to do. They don't have to
Mm.
replace that in 5 years' time, 10 years, 20 years' time. It's still going to be there. And everything will go through that soil, through the granitic sand, wash down to where the roots are, so that in 20 years' time, the only thing that might need to be done is a little bit of supplementary liquid feeding. And that's it.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
re that sort of stuff, that crusher dust, so cheap, such a great input. And we've got some really good sources of it in Australia here. Uh, an excellent form of silica,
yep,
great form of phosphorus, long, long, slow release, I guess, if you've got the right life in there that can solubilize a lot of the phosphorus. Um, that sort of thing we've also seen with like a bit of this new term paramagnetic or
yep,
paramagnetism, a
yep,
little bit of charge. I think you can check these things as to where your source is coming from and to how much that's in there, but it seems to really do a lot to benefit the plants and things like this. um
absolutely.
Sorry, just to kind of bring it back to the client and explaining about the soil health and the plant selection and things like this. So, if you've got somebody that's a really low maintenance garden, they don't have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of time and these types of things, are you setting the soil up differently? Are you coming back and doing stuff for them? Are you tr telling them what to do or just organizing, a compost or a fertilization every now and then? Because, in my experience, some people just won't do anything. They'll leave it.
Yeah.
So
Um,
what do we do
I,
in there?
Look, I'm fortunate enough that every one of my clients I love.
Beautiful.
And when I do a design for them, they're part of my family. I pour my guts into their designs.
I love that.
I just love being passionate about what I'm creating for them.
Yes.
And they know that they can send me an email anytime they like, or they can get my phone and give me a call and say, Keith, listen, this particular plant's not doing what it should be doing. What's going on? And I'm here for it. I'm here for as long as I'm walking this earth, and I haven't lost total lost the marbles. And that's what I love to do. It comes from passion. It's all about passion, and the passion is explaining to people just where it all starts, and that's with the soil.
That is really cool. And you would see you'd get a lot out of seeing these gardens long term. So can you tell me about your experience in visiting some of these gardens again that you explained about earlier, sometimes 20 years later?
Yeah.
What are some of the highlights of some of the things that you've seen, or some of the possibly like notable problems that have helped you change your mind on a few things or anything like that?
Yeah, look, there's lots of things that you learn along the track, and I'm learning every single day still. And that's what I love about this industry is you always got something to learn.
Yes.
So there's lots of things that have changed back from when I first started. And to give you an idea, I was involved in the turf industry for a bit. When I first finished school, I actually became a curator of a private girls' school. We had 28 acres of land.
Wow.
And I worked with that for 7 years, and I had a staff of 7. We put in a huge Olympic oval and all that sort of stuff.
Wow.
When I had enough of that, I went and was asked to work with as a consultant to the turf research industry. So I worked with them for a period of time. So I learned an awful lot about how to manage things, how to maintain things, being curative, being preventative, and then learning about the turf industry.
Mm-hmm.
So just going forward to where I started this conversation about learning things is that the turf type that was around in that particular period, the main turf type was a type called tall fescue.
Okay.
All right. Now, I've been to some of the jobs that I have designed over the years, and the lawns look absolutely revolting.
Right.
All right. They pull down those jobs. And the reason for that is that people don't understand turf types.
Mm-hmm.
So tall fescue, by description, is a tall grass. So therefore, when the grass is that high, it's going to have a nice deep root system that is deep down into the soil profile that is getting access to the moisture and everything else.
Correct.
But when someone comes along, and it might be the mowing guy, and he's looking for another buck, or it doesn't really need a cut this week, but I'll take a little bit off anyway. So he reduces the height of the grass. So the height of the grass reduces the depth of the root system until it comes all the way up to the surface. So then when you get the first hot day, the roots are exposed to the heat and the grass dies.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets full of winter grass and all weeds and all sorts of other crap. So that is something that I have noticed and taken on board. Most of my designs today down here in Melbourne are using various types of couch.
Yeah.
And one of the best ones for down here is one called Tiff Tuff, which is a beautiful coloured couch that is incredibly tough. It doesn't have reactions with people who have any asthmatic problems or anything else. It's a terrific grass, for kids and all the rest of it. And it's very, very easy to maintain. So they're the sorts of things that you learn on the way as part of your lifelong, journey through the industry. The other things that you look for in plants and some of the jobs is the longevity of some of the plants that you've put in there. Some plants, for instance, perennial type plants, you're going to get 5 to 7 years out of.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, and unless the people are replacing it with the like for like, you're getting a change in the whole way that garden works and reacts.
Yes.
And the same thing applies to trees. There are plants today that my clients down here in Melbourne will say, and I've just finished one. The client said, I want to have a eucalyptus casei in that garden, which is the silver princess,
Yeah.
the weeping, which is the Western Australian plant.
Right.
So therefore, in my designs, what I've learnt now is that those plants have to be specified as grafted so that they suit the conditions of the soils we've got here as opposed to the soils in WA. So they're a
Incredible.
grafted plant. And the same thing applies to the West Australian flowering gum.
Yeah.
It also is now a grafted plant. So you're seeing changes that are happening within the industry along those particular bases. So you're learning as things change, that you're learning where, people have now got a clue about the different soil types that are available, so there's those things that change as the whole thing goes along.
That's clever. I had not even thought about that sort of grafting technique to basically help it adapt to
Yeah, the
the
heavier
local
soil.
soil.
Yeah,
Yeah, and because, often I talk about when you're getting plants to try and get ones that are local or local cuttings because they're more suited to the environment, to the soil, all of these types of things, rather than grown in a controlled environment somewhere else in a different state and then shipped over here.
yeah.
You're going to put that in the ground and it's just not going to do well. Um, Coming back to lawn, actually, really interestingly, I had this wonderful guy who runs a channel on YouTube called The Backyard Naturalist, and his name's Darcy, and he did this really he does a documentary style but a little bit comical um, on lawns, and
Mm-hmm.
he was just sort of highlighting how much lawn we have in the country, how many people are using their space for lawn instead of for gardens and things like this. Um, to me, a lawn needs to be a functional space.
Yep.
So, for example, I've just put in, I just did some more turf, actually took out some gardens, which is actually going against what I like to do normally. I took out some gardens and I put in some lawn at my parents' place because we've got a little one now and we're hoping to be able to kick a ball around on there with him at some stage. So it becomes a very functional, safe
Mm-hmm.
space. Uh, are you thinking about those types of things with lawn, in terms of having it as a functional area? And then if you've got a blank space, for example, do you tend to put lawn there, or do you tend to go for a wildflowers? Do you tend to let it go wild, or a bit of a, pollinator friendly garden? If you've got a bit of a spare space, how much of it is going to lawn, and how much of it are you trying to divert into other things?
Right. Well, that all goes back right to the very beginning of our conversation here, and this is part of the client's brief.
True,
All
yes.
right. Now, I will ask my clients. You've got kids. Okay. What sort of needs do those children have for those particular spaces? Are you going to be kicking a football around? Are you going to be playing soccer? Are you going to have cricket or whatever else? So there's things that come back to that amount of grass that goes into that brief. For instance, my middle boy has two young boys, 11 and 6, and
Okay.
they're way into soccer
Yeah.
now. So I designed their garden on the basis of having a good space to run and kick a ball and have a set of nets down the very, very bottom. Um, and the way that was designed was to meet the space that they had available. So therefore, the lawn, if you can imagine an oval shape, is their lawn area, but the top area is wider than the bottom area.
Okay.
All right, so it comes down into a narrower,
Yeah.
rounded centre at the bottom there, so they could put the goals down there. But what that does to the eye is that changes your perspective of how much lawn there is. It looks like the lawn is a lot deeper, a lot longer than it actually is. So
Yeah.
so it takes the eye down to this smaller circle where you're standing on a much larger circle behind you. So they've got this method of then that they can kick the ball down to the goal line, which is their focal point,
Hmm.
but they've got a big space up the top that they can also utilise as part of their running around before they have the shot for goal.
That's
You know,
really
so
clever.
so it's looking at spaces and trying to maximise the client's requirements.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. It's
Yeah.
maximising the client's requirements.
It always brings it sort of back to that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Um, That's really beautiful. That just some nice ways of being thoughtful about the space, like you said. The other thing I was thinking about before was you were talking about certain trees, the grafted trees and things like this, and putting certain things in. Obviously, when you put a tree in or a fruit tree in or something like this, it begins very small.
Yeah.
So all of the other plants around it have lots of light. They've got, much more wind exposure, things like this. But when that tree grows up and provides a lot of shade,
Hmm.
protection, it's going to change the ecosystem in the garden underneath.
Yep.
So talking about succession and thinking about the plant choice for 15 years down the track when there's a big tree, uh, how much of that are you trying to implement for a long term versus, trying to just use what's working and things like this?
Well, you set the whole job up on the basis of what that's going to look like in full time.
Yeah,
Now, for instance, every one of my designs has got a whole row of circles on them, and those circles represent the plants.
yeah,
But they're not circles just for the hell of drawing circles. Those circles represent the mature width of those plants.
yeah.
All right.
The
So that's how
canopy.
that's based on. So I've got the trees with the bigger canopy, and then the smaller plants that will suit those underneath that canopy at the right sizes. So the whole space will totally cover itself out. Now, if you're putting in all those beautiful soil amendments that I've mentioned,
Hmm.
you're not waiting 15 years to get a full blown garden.
True.
You might be waiting 8 to 10
Yeah,
because you've got all that goodness. You've set that garden up to be that space that you want. So everything is worked out on that basis, including the parts of the garden that are going to be in the southern aspect of the traverse of the sun. So when in winter time, when the sun's dropping down 35 degrees, you've compensated for that with the plant selection that you put in there. So
yeah.
it's all taken care of at the design table. That's where it's all based on.
Yeah, that's such it to me it's just like this it's somewhat wizardry, Keith, of bringing all of these factors together to try and get everything, and everything's going to be so different and so unique in each design because it's the same principles a lot of the time, but it's just, adapting them all based on the space that you've got in front of you. Um, let's talk personally about design for you. Do you prefer to have loads of space or small spaces when working on something? Is it exciting to you to try and work within a creative boundary or just to have endless options?
Look, I've been lucky enough to have all sorts, from designing a full blown garden that covers 10 acres, for instance,
Wow,
so and involves lakes and all sorts. So
gosh.
I've had all that. But some of the hardest gardens to actually work on are little backyard gardens that are parts of units.
Yeah.
All right, you've got to maximise the impact when people come into that space to make it a wow factor.
Hmm.
So you've got to make sure that there's enough space of paving to satisfy people's needs for sitting outside with a table and chairs and all the rest of it. And then you've got to really think about what you're doing around that walled section. Where are you creating the interest and the colour in that? And have you got space to put in there to put a deciduous tree, for
Yeah.
instance, that's
Yeah.
going to provide that summer shade, but then going to lose its leaves to allow that solar opportunities to come back into that space in the wintertime. So it's not just a single use space. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of thought got to go into a small area. We might be talking 4 meters by 4 meters.
Yeah.
There's a lot of planting that's got to go into that to create that interest that's in that space. And the same applies to 10 acres.
Yeah.
You've got to manage the whole job. You've got to think about the maintenance that's involved with that. And just to give you an idea, in those sorts of spaces, I don't put trees in lawns
Yeah.
because you've got to go around it with a lawnmower. You've got to go around it with a brush cutter. You're going to ring bark the bloody thing.
Yeah.
You're going to destroy those trees. So trees go in garden beds.
Hmm.
If it's in the middle of a lawn, it's in a garden bed.
Yeah.
There'll be garden beds all the way around. And probably one of the most important factors that happens to me when I sit on my drawing board is I have a little person sitting on my shoulder, and her name is Edna Walling, who was Australia's greatest female landscape designer.
Beautiful. Oh, awesome.
So, so I studied Edna Walling, and I have lots of little things that she says to me as I'm sitting on my drawing board, looking at the brief and then coming up with a design. And one of the most important things that she says to me is this: a garden you can see all at once is not much of a garden at all. All
Wow.
right. And the reason that is so important is that if you walk out your backyard, and regardless of what size you've got, if you walk out that backyard and you can see absolutely everything that's going on in that backyard, it's not going to take you out. It's not going to say to me, come out and see what's over behind this particular space here, or come and see what's behind this garden bed. See what's over here. It doesn't take you on a journey unless you've created these particular garden rooms. And that's what
Wow.
I try so much to do. Um, I've done big gardens where they've got children. So you provide spaces within those gardens that haven't got physical boundaries, but have got a pathway that wanders all the way through the garden beds, and there'll be little spaces within that garden where you can sit and contemplate. You can get away from mum, get away from dad, have a hissy fit, whatever else.
Yeah.
So it's everything's got to have a journey.
That's a that's such a profound thing. I relate very much to having sort of that mentor voice of various people that, I'm
Yeah,
fortunate chatting to a bunch of people like yourself that are really, really knowledgeable. And I get these little tidbits of things that come through in the work that I do. But I really love that idea of just it being invited by the garden to go and figure out what's going on and
yeah,
just to be taken through on that journey. Um, with just returning to small spaces, that's obviously a lot harder to do. When you've got a 4x4 space that you're kind of walking out and you're in that space already.
yeah,
Uh, there's a lot of other problems that come with small spaces, and one that's come up a lot because so many of us are in these smaller living situations now increasingly. Is that exposure to light, the sunlight. And if
yeah.
you're in high rises, you're in cities, you're in apartments, you're in all sorts of different places, you're very limited with light. And without necessarily turning to supplemental light, is there anything that you try and do to maximize the amount of sunlight or light exposure that you get in these types of areas?
Yeah, well, you have to, because that's going to impact on your plant selection, which
Yeah.
is a huge thing. But there's certain plants that you can put into those environments with low light that will still provide you with the interest and the colour
Yeah.
that a garden requires. And then, of course, in these small spaces, you have lots of other opportunities. Now, and I think back to this small little courtyard, in a two-story apartment. Um, it's got four walls. It's got one wall which is the building itself. Then it's got the other three walls which are the boundaries.
Yeah.
So you've got all these hard lines. So what I did with this particular job was to create green walls.
Yeah.
All right, and rather than just having straight green walls, where you have a corner that meets like that, we used concrete reinforcing mesh with treated pine uprights, and we curved the concrete reinforcing mesh around that corner, so
Clever.
it gave you this circular effect. And then we grew up a Trachleospermum, which is the evergreen jasmine, up that
That's right.
wall. And I love using that because it's a climber that will perform from the ground all the way up to the top. You don't get a lot of climbers will go all the way up the top, and you've just got it sitting on the top, and it's all bare on the bottom.
Yeah.
So you can create that sort of space. And then on the other walls, the opportunity that are going to be dependent upon their north, south, east facing. But you have the opportunity on some of these other walls to put espaliered fruit trees and plants like that on it. So
Yeah.
you're creating a lot of interest as well, and giving structure to a garden, which is probably the most important thing that is in consideration. Again, it's Edna Walling on the shoulder again, saying to me, a garden must have structure.
Yeah,
It's got to have some sort of structure in some way that pulls the whole thing together.
that's really clever. Mate, your thinking is so beautiful. I just love all the nuanced ways that you're thinking about these things. A question I find myself asking a lot at the moment is like, what is top of mind for you at the moment in terms of what's interesting you moving forward in this industry? What's still exciting you? What sort of things are you, diving into head first at the moment that's really fresh and exciting for you?
Well, it's not necessarily new plant varieties or anything else that's creating my interest. It is my clients that are creating the interest, because I'm getting an awful lot of young clients that now want to be involved with a garden that's edible.
Beautiful,
That
beautiful.
they want to be able to get their children to go out the backyard and pick beautiful, homegrown, fresh produce that's free of chemicals and nasties and all the other crap. And that is a huge passion for me. That is something that I particularly really love. I've got two grandkids that live fairly close to us, and when they arrive with their parents, they look at their mum and dad and they say to them, "Why don't you stay here and talk to Nan and Pop while we go and visit the garden?" And they go out the backyard and they're gone. And you walk out there and they're just picking broccoli or beans or tomatoes or fruit and just
That's such
consuming.
a joy.
And that is the best possible thing that you can give to a child. It's not bloody money and toys and crap like that. It is an involvement with nature, seeing where food comes from, seeing that it's seasonal, seeing how much it tastes better. My grandson, one of the two grandsons, had a competition picking beautiful carrots out of the ground.
That's great.
And they took a whole heap home, and they were used over a few days. And the oldest one looked up at his mother, and while he was eating a carrot, he said, "This carrot's come from Pop's place, hasn't it? Because it doesn't taste like the stuff that you normally buy us." And that sort of thing is just brilliant.
Yes.
He's getting an understanding of just how good homegrown food is, so that hopefully will instill in him that opportunity, if he gets it, to grow his own as well. It's beautiful.
It's absolutely beautiful. I resonate with that a lot because that's a big part of my mission, especially
Yeah,
now having a young boy. I had that with my grandmother, being able to go and pick produce in her garden.
yeah,
And every time I back to that property, we went back recently, and I can just go and pick pears and apples off the tree. It's just so joy filled, and it's such a straight path from good, healthy organic produce straight into me,
yep,
and it's that it just feels really authentic and
yeah.
true. So. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again to Keith. I highly recommend you go and check out some of his links in the description or the show notes below. You can go and follow along on his Instagram. He always shares different tips and tricks and little projects that he's working on. So you can go and see what he has to offer there. Now, if you enjoyed this conversation, as always, it is super helpful to go and share this episode, to leave a review, any thoughtful comments, some stars. Please, please, please. That really does help spread the awareness to more people to come and jump onto this show, get some value out of it, and hopefully inspire more people to get their hands in the soil, get dirty, and start growing something for themselves. So that's the one thing that you can do to support me. Otherwise, share the episode if you thought that Keith has some wonderful knowledge to share and you think that someone would find that knowledge helpful. And again, look, we've got another exciting episode next week. I'm not going to spoil it just yet, but we have another great guest as well. So look forward to seeing you then. And as always, take care and bye for now.